good for blue ribbon trout proved deadly for native warm water fish downstream. Federal law protects endangered fish, such as the Colorado pike minnow and humpback chub. It's one of the rare public laws that also protects water flow and temperature along the river. The goal of regulating the river becomes balanced use.
Even though we look at this river here and its beauty, it's all the little tributaries that are significant. It's this part, it's the part above it, it's the part below it. It's all the little pieces that make it whole. And selfish, we look sometimes at what they do to protect endangered species. It affects what happens to us up here. But in the grand scheme of things, what's important is the overall health of the whole fishery. I mean, we aren't the only ones that are using it and need it.
Besides creating a world-class fishery, the regulated flow from Flaming Gorge also creates a longer rafting season.
People have been running rivers for thousands of years, but not recreationally like they do here. And it really started here on the Green in the Colorado. But it's really got its start in the 1930s on the Green with Bus Hatch, taking people just for pleasure because he wanted to go. He liked to go. He didn't have the money. He found people who did, and they paid for the trip. And he built the boats and took them down the river.
The first runners navigated the river in wooden boats, but they were heavy and fragile. Then in 1938, the world took notice when French newlyweds ran the Green in 18-foot kayaks with a rubberized canvas skin stretched over the hull. They also brought their own special modifications. The French were ahead of their time. Rubber was the wave of the future for river runners, especially after World War II, when surplus inflatable rafts became available by the thousands.
And a lot of people at one time realized, here's a way to go down the river. This thing, if you hit a rock, it just bounces off. If you can easily repair it, you can hold 4 or 5 people. They're the progenitors of the rafts we're on now. So river running really took off.
Today, nearly 100,000 people float the Green every year. The most remote and popular stretches are through Lador and Desolation Canyons. Once thought the most deadly by John Wesley Powell, they are now celebrated as the most spectacular in wild rapids and beauty.
Parts of the Green River, especially in Desolation and Gray Canyon, feel much more like the river of old. I probably feel like my boat is a time machine and that I can go back and I'm sort of running a river that's not all that different from the river that people 50 years ago or 100 years ago floated.
This raw feel is due to the confluence of the Yampa River with the Green at Echo Park. The Yampa is the last undammed river on the Colorado River system and one of the few remaining in the entire country.
It's the Yampa that keeps the Green really a free-flowing river, you know, where you have the wonderful highs and the lows, and you have driftwood coming in, and the river's just doing what the river should be doing. And, a dam control river acts very differently when you have nothing but controlled flows. It changes the whole ecology. And up here, this has really been allowed to remain pretty much a free-flowing river because of the Yampa. And I think that's one thing that makes it incredibly special. Just the wild feeling out here. Just that you really feel like you're out truly in the wilderness. And I don't know, the river just gets in your blood. It keeps calling.
For me, it's kind of like a spiritual experience coming down on the river. When I was a young boy, what drew me to rivers was Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. I think it was just sitting in the middle of a body of water that was alive and moving, and it was that self-propulsion.
I always loved the possibilities. It seemed like it's always going somewhere and it's always coming from somewhere, and there's always a question. There's always this intriguing mystery behind it. What's the river seen in its path? What is it going to see in the future?
There's just something about being on the water. You're off your secure land base, you're in a different element. Almost everyone who comes down the river experiences the same thing. Lives are changed. I've seen marriages come about, I've seen marriages break up.
And I think the river is a great equalizer, especially if you're learning to row your boat. And it really doesn't care, you know, who you were in that other life. It doesn't care if you were important or famous when you're learning to row your own boat. I think especially people coming from cities, you mean to be out here where you have this incredible quiet. It just does magic for your soul.
The scale of this place is amazing. I asked, how deep are we in the canyon? And I thought it was about 1,000 feet. They said it's a 5,000-foot canyon wall that we were in, and your mind literally can't fathom it. You just realize you're just a really tiny, tiny part of a great ancient system.
You go from a billion-year-old rock to 66-year-old million-year-old rock in a matter of 4 days. And that's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
One can learn pretty much everything from the river if you just spend some time here.
Modern man isn't the first to learn from the green. Centuries before John Wesley Powell, indigenous people discovered their own wisdom about life in an arid land.
The river was virtually unknown archaeologically. We know a lot about 9 Mile Canyon, and we're starting to learn a lot about Range Creek Canyon, but hardly anything was known about Desolation Canyon and how people lived along the rivers. It's very exciting because this area has not been studied, and because of its inaccessibility by road, there are still a lot of cultural materials here that are intact and ripe for study.
I think learning from the people of the past is very important for us, of any generation, to understand our place in the world, to understand what happened in a place before us. It helps us have a sense of our own lives.
On the green, written history goes back over 200 years. Fremont Indian history, nearly 1,000. But for both, the water and the river is a shared story of survival, progress, and loss.
One of the things that I'm always struck by is 1,000 years ago, during Fremont time, there were probably hundreds of people living in this canyon. Well, how many people are living in this canyon now between Green River and the Uinta Basin? None, hardly any. And why? I mean, we use the canyon, but we bring our food in 120-quart big coolers, and we have boats and, you know, all kinds of things that we need. We couldn't make a living here. You know, there's the few attempts at farming in this canyon have been short-lived, kind of. It's a very tough place, yet during the Fremont period, they thrived in this place. Now, one of the things that we know happened during the later years of the Fremont period was it was getting warmer and the population was getting larger. Well, I don't know about all the causes that we don't have the Fremont culture around today, but those two things are definitely part of it. If we can learn from studying what happened to them 1,000 years ago, we might be able to apply some of those things to understanding our own circumstance today with warming temperatures and growing populations.
How were they using the environment? Did the Fremont population grow so big so quickly that it exceeded the carrying capacity of this very fragile and limited landscape? And what happens when you have too many people in a desert? Not enough water to grow enough food to feed all the people that are there. I think those are very similar issues that we face today in the desert Southwest. How do we allocate our water? What's the highest and best use of that?